Okay, let's dive into a legal drama that is absolutely wild. It all starts with a firefighter's grudge, but it ends up completely redefining the law for our digital age. This is the story of how our private DMs and texts basically became legally binding documents.
So think about this for a second. Can faking a text message actually get you thrown in jail? Now, that might seem like a simple question, but the answer takes us on this insane legal roller coaster. We're talking a case that goes from guilty to not guilty, and then all the way up to the Supreme Court for a decision that changed everything.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off with Wu Qicha, a firefighter over in Taichung. Back in 2018, he gets a bad performance review, and, well, he ends up getting fired. He felt he was totally wronged by his bosses, so he decided to fight back in court. And that, right there, is when things started to get really complicated. As he's fighting his dismissal, Wu suddenly finds himself facing a couple of very different accusations. One of them pretty much fizzled out, but the other one, oh boy, that one set off a legal firestorm.
So the first accusation was that Wu had been making these anonymous posts online just trashing his bosses. But investigators couldn't actually prove it was him. The posts were made using overseas IPs and burner emails. So those charges, they got dropped. Poof, gone.
But it was the second charge where things really got interesting. See, to help his case, Wu submitted a screenshot of a line chat. It was supposedly with his superior, Xu Yunlan, and in it, she seems to admit that management was out to get him. A smoking gun, right? Well, there was this one problem. Prosecutors claimed Wu faked the entire conversation himself. So the case goes to the Taichung District Court, and at first, it really looked like a pretty open and shut case. And bam, on December 20th, 2022, the court brings down the hammer. Wu Qicha is found guilty. They said he forged the line messages and then tried to use them as real evidence, which is a specific crime. His sentence, 5 months in prison. And the court's reasoning was pretty simple. The evidence showed that the fake account of his boss was created on his phone just 5 days before this supposed chat. And since he and his real boss barely ever talked, the court was like, there's no way he just mistook this new account for the real person. They decided it had to be a deliberate fake. But hold on, because this is where the legal roller coaster takes its first really big drop. Wu, of course, appealed the decision. The case moves up to the Taichung High Court, and this is where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. On October 5th, 2023, the High Court completely flips the script. The conviction is reversed. Wu was suddenly found not guilty. That 5-month sentence, thrown right out. So you're probably thinking, wait a second, how could he possibly be innocent if the evidence was faked? Well, the High Court's logic was kind of fascinating. They used a really traditional, old-school interpretation of the law. They basically argued that forgery laws are there to protect documents, like a contract, right? But a simple line chat, in their view, that's just a conversation. So even if he faked it, he hadn't forged a legally recognized document. Well, the prosecutors weren't having any of that. They appealed again, and this time, the case went all the way to the top, to Taiwan's Supreme Court. And now the court had to answer this massive question for our modern age. In a world where we live in our DMs, what exactly is a document anymore? The whole case really boiled down to this one kind of clunky legal term, a quasi-private document. See, the forgery laws were written for paper and ink, but there's a part of the law that extends the idea to other things, like audio, video, and, most importantly here, digital records that show what someone intended to say. So here you have these two completely different ways of looking at it. The High Court took the old view. A chat is just talk, it's not a formal legal thing. But the Supreme Court came in with the new view, saying, whoa, not so fast. In today's world, that's just not good enough. They argued that a digital conversation isn't just talk that vanishes. It's a saved, durable record of important stuff that happens in our lives. And this brought us to the key moment. On May 8, 2024, the Supreme Court laid down the new law of the land. They declared that when a digital message records someone's statements about real-world stuff and you can trace it back to them, it has legal weight. For the purposes of forgery law, it is a document. So armed with this powerful new rule from the nation's highest court, the case gets kicked right back down to the High Court for a do-over. And you can bet the outcome was going to be very different this time. I mean, just look at this 2-year journey. It was a total nail-biter. Guilty, then not guilty, then the Supreme Court steps in and changes the rules, which leads to a new guilty verdict in August 2024. Wu tried one last appeal, but it was dismissed. The long legal battle was finally over. So, after all those twists and turns, the final outcome was crystal clear. Wu Qicha's guilty verdict was put back in place.
Under the Supreme Court's new standard, faking that line chat was absolutely a crime, and his original 5-month sentence was now final.
But here's the thing. This case was about so much more than just one firefighter's grudge. The Supreme Court's decision didn't just affect him, it created a powerful new legal reality for every single one of us who uses a smartphone.
So, what does all this mean for you? Well, it means the law now officially sees our digital chats not just as talk, but as actual records of what we say and mean. Faking a DM or a text message and trying to use it as proof, well, that can now be treated as forgery, just like faking a signature on a contract. The legal system has finally caught up to the fact that our digital lives have real-world, legally binding consequences.
And that leaves us with a really provocative thought, doesn't it? Technology is always evolving way faster than our laws. This case redefined documents for today. But what's next? Will an AI-generated voice message count as a document? What about your search history? Your location data? This case set a huge new precedent, and it sure as heck won't be the last.